Okay, we're live. Give me 1 second to align the planets.
Oh, wow. You have a literal, that looks like a planet.
Well, yeah, we got to align them. So
It's
we
brilliant.
we're on the clock.
Love it.
Okay. I have with me today Rigel. Rigel, I personally don't like introductions. So if there's anything you want to say about yourself that you think is important to give any kind of context, you can do that, or you
Mm.
cannot do that, or you can remain silent. Or
Yeah, I mean, I can just give a little context. I live in Austin, Texas. I'm a dad, a husband. I am a kind of mystical art welder slash musician and community builder aficionado. Um, and all those things swirl together in a internal spiral that kind of emerges on my YouTube stream called The Cosmic Navel, where song runs through all of reality.
you got the branding nailed. You got the pitch. It's beautiful. I love it.
That's what happens when you say, your little beginning blurb at the beginning of every show for a year. I mean, I've said that probably 50 times.
Yeah, because you do like live streams on Friday mornings. Uh, you start
11:30,
11:30 a.m. Central.
11:30, yeah, Central Time. Usually, I mean, life gets in the way, but that's the time I usually have open, which is a pain because a lot of people like to go on Paul's stream, which happens around the same time. So it's just
Yeah, in the little corner of the internet that you and I sometimes hang out in, you decided to have a live stream the same time as like the person at the top of the hierarchy has a live stream, which is great. It's great.
yeah, it's a good problem to have, because it means that like when when schedules are overlapping because there's so much going on, like this is healthy.
Yeah. So I want to talk about technology with you, which I told you, and I want to talk about spiral dynamics with you. And you're not an expert, but
Not an expert.
you are very much aware of language
Mm-hmm.
around spiral dynamics. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to start with like I don't know, like spiral dynamics primer, just kind of like
Mm-hmm.
talking through the words that are on this image. So I first like learned about spiral dynamics. It would have been like I don't know, around 2015, 2014. I went to a Rob Bell conference in Laguna Beach,
Mm-hmm.
which was like pitched as being about communication. And then a ton of it was about spiral dynamics. And I was like, what are we doing? And then it just kept like kind of blowing my mind. And I was like, huh. And at the time, I was working in like a little, I wasn't getting paid, but I was at a little church plant in Northern Illinois. And I had had an opportunity to move to a mega church. And I was viewing these two different churches as kind of these different kinds of consciousness, and was
Mm-hmm.
like, what if I could use some of this consciousness stuff to like just frame my language, which is kind of what the conference is about, was like you can talk to different people at different stages of thinking using different language. um I feel like I'm already in the weeds here, so maybe we
No,
should go ahead.
yeah, no, that's all great. I mean, I can just tell a little bit about how I got into it, and we'll just pull threads as they come up because I'm a very meandering style talker, so you're gonna have to like keep me reined in.
Easy.
Um, I first ran across the term spiral dynamics by a friend who was like, "Oh, Rigel, you got to look into this." And he just told me to Google spiral dynamics, and I remember writing it down in my journal, and I was like, "Those two words spell cult, like on themselves, like by themselves, spiral and dynamics. Every time I hear those words in somebody's title, I think like cult, and then together I'm like cult. And it turns out there is some kind of culty stuff out there with this.
Yes.
You know, but I think there's also a lot of truth that you have to kind of parse through. But I think there's a lot of good stuff out there. So probably after a year, I finally Googled it and I ran across Don Beck's version of this kind of integral worldview. There's the Don Beck version and the Ken Wilber version, and at one point they were working together on it, and then egos got in the way, and then they parted ways. And I don't even know all of the lore and history around that, but you know, things happen, and they develop different color systems. You know, there's these like colors that are associated with these different stages of development, and you know, people are very opinionated about that stuff, and I am too, to some extent, but you know, not too much. So I did finally read some stuff about it, watch some videos, and actually I ended up also watching The Liturgist. I think to this day, I think The Liturgist has done the best kind of summary overview of what spiral dynamics is. And it's like episode 5, I think. So if you really want to dive into a well-crafted presentation on this, I think that would be a great starting point for people. But I think it hit me in a time of my life where, you know, I'm trying to make sense of the world. I'm trying to build community. I had just taken we were talking a little bit before we went live. I was working on building intentional communities through real estate, and it didn't really work, but I had lots of like grand ideas. And one of the things that I did during that time was I took a mediation and facilitation course at the Austin Dispute Resolution Center, and found out that I like fell in love with conflict, because I have never really known how to deal with conflict. I've known how to kind of get through it because I'm good-natured and kind of easygoing, and I can endure a lot of pain and have a good attitude through it. But that's not actually doing anything productive with the conflict. It's just kind of kicking the can down the road. And so I took that to help just build communities, because if I'm going to be an expert in community, I need to know how to deal with like the number one thing that keeps communities from forming, which is conflict. And so that's when I first kind of ran across kind of a different level of consciousness. I wouldn't have been able to put it into stages in any sort of way, but it was like I was exposed to this way of kind of understanding that behind every position is a value, like an animating value energy, you know, like behind, say, for example, you have in a individual conflict where you have one person that's like, you spend too much money, and the other person is like, you're a tight ass. And you know, but behind those values might be something like freedom and stability. And when you can get into that value space, freedom and stability actually can dance with each other. Like being a tight ass and being, you know, those kind of positions that get people stuck in the conflict, that just ends in impasse. But in this value space, you can be creative with people that you're kind of in opposition with. And so the reason I'm talking about that is because I think as we're looking at this spiral, like we have archaic consciousness, tribal, warrior, traditional, modernist, postmodernist, we go up the spiral. What's happening is these these are like value systems that are expanding in what they can value. I feel like lower down in that archaic consciousness. That's almost like not even really a worldview. That's just kind of a survival space. You're valuing staying alive, basically, and doing whatever's necessary. But as you move up this spiral, there's kind of an expansion that's happening in what you can value. And yeah, go for it. Ask questions, get me back on track.
Well, no, you're right on track. But I wanted to like kind of put a frame up and see if you agree with this. Because one of the things that, as I've thought about spiral dynamics a little bit here and there across like 10 years, one of the like, because that culty thing you mentioned, there were periods where I was like, I don't know, this thing is just, it's too strange. But then I found it difficult to dismiss. And the reason spiral dynamics has stuck with me so much is because, like, when you talk about that first thing, that archaic, like my understanding is that plays out like in the life of a baby. Like an individual baby starts with sort of just this like needing survival. But also, if we go back in time to like groups of Neanderthals in caves, that group functions as like just trying to survive. So there's like an individual way you can look at this, but you can also look at this across groups turning into cities, turning into nation states, etc. So there's like an individual and a communal aspect that when you see that pattern play out, I was like, whoa, that's just like, it's just kind of trippy.
Thanks for that frame, because that's probably where I should have started, but I started with my story, which ends up in all sorts of places. But yeah, I mean, the fundamental idea is that individual consciousness and culture, kind of individual and we spaces, evolve through these predictable stages of development. And in childhood development, this is documented in like cold, hard science, right? With childhood development, there's certain things that you do at certain stages of development and certain things you don't do because that will like short circuit the development of a child, or, there's a lot of, I think, energy and knowledge around individual development. But this idea that cultures go through developmental phases too, I think that's what is so fascinating to me, is because, or just to kind of see how my own evolution maps to these kind of cultural evolutions. And yeah.
Okay, the only other question I want to ask, and this might be an absolute can of worms, but when you use the word consciousness, what do you mean by that?
Boy, that's a good question.
And I feel like we have to make some attempt at that, because on this image, it's used 8 times.
Yeah. I mean, for me, and this isn't my image, this is an image from, I think, Steve McIntosh's book on integral consciousness. And he probably has a definition of consciousness that's really well thought out. But I think of consciousness as like that, boy, can you even define it really? It's like that part of me that is in process of becoming, it's aware, maybe it's the spark of God, it's this like seed that grows. I don't know, it's like the logos within. What does consciousness mean to you? I don't know how to answer that exactly.
I have like a theory that is wildly underdeveloped, but I kind of wonder if we started talking about consciousness in replacement talking about a soul,
Hmm.
because it's like the soul language completely kind of fell off the face of the map, and
Yeah.
then consciousness became something you could like talk about in scientific studies. And I've always just wondered, like, do we just pick a new word? I don't know. I mean, I don't really know, but like, I often think about, because I don't even really know what a soul is, to be honest. Like,
Yeah.
um, and when you get to like the old words, like in, hopefully this is accurate. I think like in Hebrew, when you see that word soul, maybe not always, but it's often the transliteration would be nefesh,
Hmm.
which means like throat, but also like throat as a metaphor for like the place wind enters and where life comes. So it's like, I mean, it's just layers within layers within layers.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Consciousness is like the song that that your that blows from the uncreated light. I'm just smashing words together because this is hard, but this is also, I feel like it's really important now that people are trying to assign consciousness to like machines, AI, and I think that we need to figure out a little bit what this is so that we can kind of make a distinction between humans and machines, because I there seems to be this weird transhumanist movement to like mix the two in ways that are just make me want to retch just a little bit. Have you watched sorry, you say something.
no, 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 no.
I was
Go, go, go.
Oh, I was about to go on a rabbit trail. Have you
Let's
watched
do it.
Battlestar Galactica?
Um, no, I'm
Okay.
aware of it a little
Okay.
bit,
Well,
but I
then
haven't
there's like
watched
an
season.
original series which is from the 70s, and I've watched little pieces, but it doesn't do anything for me. The real the one that kind of changed me was the more recent one that came out like in the mid aughts. It was kind of the one of the first real TV series where the you had these like long arc character developments in a series that was like making me wonder if maybe this is just better than a typical Hollywood movie, because you have so much time to develop and like tell a story that's nuanced instead of cramming it into an hour and a half. Uh,
Yeah, and isn't like from what I know, like one of the central things, there's like Cylons, which are part machine, part human, or all machine, but look like humans, and you don't know who's machine and who's human, and that plays out across seasons.
yeah, that's basically it. We create machines that then look like humans. We can't tell the difference, and so the whole thing is kind of like trying to figure out what's Cylon and what is human, and does it matter? Um, so it brings up a lot of questions. I don't remember why I went down that rabbit trail. We're talking about AI and like what is consciousness, and
And what is a human?
what is a human, and I would reserve consciousness to something that is uniquely human. So just to be clear about that.
Okay, so you kind of brought in like a musical metaphor to this, and I'm curious if that would actually be helpful as we kind of dig into these different things,
Mm,
because I wonder if like, because you were talking about how there's kind of this like expansion thing, and
hmm.
what I was thinking about when you were saying that was like, I don't know if like archaic is, I don't have the right music, but I like, is it are there new notes that are added, or is it like there's new instruments being added which then allow for like a greater symphony to be
Yeah.
constructed across time?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I literally were you hanging out when I did the I kind of debuted some songs that I
Yes.
composed, yeah, that were kind of interpretations of each stage of development.
Yes,
And
I love those. Those are on
Um,
Spotify, yeah?
yeah, I believe so. They're at least on YouTube. I can find a link to that. But I mean, it's important actually to have the video kind of. I mean, if you want to learn about these stages of consciousness through my interpretive, musical, visual lens, it's best to watch the videos. But it may be helpful to just walk through some of these because
Let's do it.
we're kind of talking about this spiral that up to this point people are like, I don't know what this even is. What are we looking at?
Oh,
Um,
they've clicked off. They're watching Logan Paul right now.
oh yeah, that's right, that's right. Um, so the way I understand it is, each I came across this spiral dynamics through kind of a color scheme, not this diagram. So I kind of learned about it through each stage of development, both individual and we spaces, cultural consciousness, moving through kind of these different colors. And I see the colors as actually being important because they're easy to reference. They give you kind of this like quick, instantaneous visual splash of like what this is about. And they also add a layer of information that this black and white thing doesn't add. But the other thing is it can also become very jargony. And that's the real danger of the colors is people start speaking in colors and you're like, you are sounding like a cult member. Yep. But let me just maybe part of the understanding of this whole system is actually going through the color stage and then coming out the other end, like growing past the colors. Okay. So let me just like walk through some of these. So if you start at the bottom of the spiral, you have archaic consciousness. I map this to, or the spiral dynamics colors maps this to beige, kind of like, you can remember it as being out on the, Sahara survival. You're in the individual state. This is like the young child doesn't really distinguish themselves from their parent yet, their mother. It's just all about like getting sustenance, being warm, and then as kind of a cultural system, that's also what we're doing is like food, sex, warmth, shelter, and probably the man eats first because if he doesn't eat, like everyone dies. So this is not like an egalitarian system where we're okay. So that's kind of where this starts, and each stage of consciousness, it kind of solves some problem and then also creates a new set of problems that only something outside of that stage of consciousness can solve. And that's where the evolutionary process happens. So archaic kind of eventually, leads to the tribal consciousness. And I map this to purple, which is, they call it mythic magic tribal in that, individual consciousness. This is like probably ages, you're still in that like probably 3 to 4 range. It's hard to map these to exactly, childhood developmental stages. I'm sure someone's done it.
Yeah.
But in a cultural system, this is where we move into like an agrarian system. We're not nomads, wandering across the land. We're able to stay in one place and start growing food. And when that developed, they also developed some kind of like basic religious ritual sacrificial systems to I don't know, keep coherence with the community, and they would make sacrifices to the gods. And maybe, you know, maybe you're sacrificing some of your produce, maybe you're sacrificing like something really valuable. Maybe the most valuable thing you could sacrifice is your child. And so maybe that takes on, you know, that roots in for a while until one person is like, hell no, you're not taking my child. I'm out of here. And that is this next stage of development, which the warrior consciousness, people call it ego consciousness. It maps to red. And red is also bloody, you know, might is right. So it's again kind of a tribal system, but it solves this like sacrificing your child problem. Like there's a lot of pathologies that start to develop in these mythic, magic, enchanted worldviews. And so the warrior consciousness, this is also maybe like the no stage in childhood development, where the child is really starting to understand who they are separate from their family. And like it's a really important stage to go through. Like if you miss the no stage, if that was kind of ripped out of you, either because of some traumatic experience as a child or just parents that were so overbearing and like impossible to like negotiate with, you just kind of bypass that, then maybe you're going to have to go through that no stage when you're like 40, you know, and kind of find that. Sorry, we don't have to get into the analysis yet because it gets interesting when you're in kind of cultural systems. But yeah, go for it.
Just one thing to note is like, if tomorrow morning, like I wake up in the middle of the night and my house is on fire and I lose everything and now I'm homeless, like I'm going to be in archaic, because now it's going to be like, I'm a homeless guy and I gotta survive. I gotta figure out where am I going to go. And it's like, I can only operate out of that as a 33-year-old person. And then it's like, I'm starting over again in some sense. So like, even as adults, I don't know, you get, once you move through a stage, it's not like it's like over. Like there's still, I don't know, there can be movement across this stuff.
Yeah. Our circumstances will kind of like catalyze movement back to these earlier stages. It's also like you kind of there's, you know, the way atoms and molecules and, you know, life systems are organized. Like you can always break things down to a more fundamental stage of development, like wherever that stable point is. You know, maybe you don't go all the way back to archaic. Maybe you go back to warrior. You know, and so this warrior stage of consciousness, maybe it's the no stage. It's that kind of understanding. It's very selfish, self-centered. It's very ego-driven in kind of the cultural system. This may show up as like what they call the street configuration in gangs, where you have kind of like the gang leader is basically this tribal leader that will both protect you or kill you, depending on you know how useful you are and obedient you are. So this isn't like necessarily some higher principle that the warrior is following. This is like he is the highest principle. And so like the Caesars kind of acted like this, these feudal tribal systems. It's very bloody. But then, you know, that is better in some ways than this tribal consciousness where, you know, I don't know. It's hard to say that it's better. I'm not like a, you know, historian, and um, I didn't study these things. I just riff on them. Okay, Ethan. So warrior consciousness, it solves some problems, but also creates some other problems. And so traditional consciousness comes along. This is kind of like the teamwork stage in social, you know, individual development. Like there's no I in team. Kids are starting to like join soccer teams. They're learning how to be, you know, collaborative, follow the
We need
rules.
rules.
Yes, yes. And maybe collaborative is a little bit of a stretch. It's more like learn how to follow the rules. And what the traditional system is yeah, it's like there's these there is this system of rules that is above, it's above the warrior leader, it's above the gang leader, it's above Caesar. You know, when Jesus says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, give to God what is God's, he's kind of, I mean, I see that as like kind of a diss against Caesar. Like there is something higher than Caesar. And when a culture reaches critical mass around this idea that there's something higher than Caesar, then there is a massive like shift, and that whole warrior consciousness crumbles, because now we're serving something even greater, so great that like we can't even really define it. We have like rules, and at least, you know, we have like a system that we can all follow together. And that traditional consciousness, it's also considered like ethnocentric. So if you're part of this group that follows these rules, you're protected. So this is more expansive than the warrior consciousness. That's just kind of, it's very tribal. It's like, you know, the people on my block. But the traditional consciousness can include the whole city. It can include whole regions. It can hold, you know, a state. And there's also this element of like self-sacrifice for the greater good, you know. It also has some like black and white thinking showing up. Some pathologies are like rigid intolerance, dogmatic fanaticism, prejudice, fundamentalism, chauvinism. And so that's where like this system kind of blossoms into its kind of most useful and beautiful state, and then starts to develop pathologies that then need to be transcended. And that's where modern consciousness comes into play. And modern consciousness, so the traditional consciousness, I forgot to say, that maps to blue for me, whereas modern consciousness maps to orange. Now you'll notice there's a little bit of a pattern starting to form in the colors. And this is why I think the spiral dynamics colors are actually an important, they add really important information. On this right side, the warrior, modernist, even archaic barely even gets, that's barely considered a stage. The warrior, modernist, integral, these are warm colors. And tribal, traditional, postmodern, post-integral, these are cool colors. And what that represents is kind of like the difference between the like the individual energy and the group energy. So there's kind of like a self-expression. They call it, in spiral dynamics, they call it express self and sacrifice self. And so there's this kind of general pendulum swing that's happening in this evolutionary process between express self, sacrifice self. Too much sacrifice self, you bring back in this express self, but at this higher level that can integrate all these other kind of values. And then, you know, when the express self kind of loses itself in the weeds, like the prodigal son. Okay, maybe the prodigal son is the pathology expression of express self, and the other son is maybe the sacrifice self pathologized a little bit. So there's this movement that's happening between the parts and the whole. That's another way to kind of look at it.
Yeah, I learned it as like I to we, which is probably like the
Yeah.
simplest. There's
Yeah.
far more technical ways to do when you're doing like work in this, but I think maybe
Yeah.
because like archaic is like I need to survive, then tribal is like we need to survive, and warrior is like I need to rule, and tradition is like we need rules.
Yes. Man, you should be described. Even I don't know why you're talking to me about this. You like
Well, because
got a better.
I don't know anybody else that like has a knowledge base that I could like riff back and forth with. So
Yeah.
we're riffing.
Okay, good. Well, it's just fun to talk with you because you're like tracking all this and adding a lot. So we have the modernist consciousness, orange. This is the I space. This is in kind of like individual consciousness. I think they call this the achiever stage of development. Kids are probably in high school at this point, maybe college, maybe 30 years old, in our day and age. Maybe 40 years old in our day and age. And this is like an annoying stage to watch someone go through. I'm like, oh, I'm so annoyed. You're like so perfect and everything. Sorry, I have a chip on my shoulder about every one of these stages. So,
Well, and I think about this as like kind of science and rationality.
yes.
And I think about when the kid starts going like, but why is the sky blue? What makes the sky blue? And you're like, can you just follow the rules? But no, I need to know why this rule exists. And you're like, I don't know why the sky is blue, dude. Like, stop pestering me with all these questions.
Right. And then at the same time, it's like, oh my God, I'm so glad you're asking these questions because this is how you break out of the just pure like fundamentalist, follow the rules, shut up and calculate. Wow, actually, that's interesting. Shut up and calculate is actually probably part of the modern consciousness, but it's actually kind of a traditional impulse, I think. So, yes, the modern consciousness that kind of maybe emerged, it was bubbling in the, early Greek philosophers, but it didn't really, take hold and like take over the world until probably the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment is kind of marked by like, I think, therefore I am. So this is very much like an I-centered stage of development, both culturally and individually. And like, yeah, like Think and Grow Rich, this is like just have a good attitude and work hard and you're going to achieve your dreams. It's the American dream. This is like America was like formed. The United States of America, was formed during this place. But the problem is it also, there's people learn how to game the system here. They, everything is overly efficient to the point where you end up kind of paving over all of the beauty and the things that are growing and messy for the sake of expediency. And you, end up with kind of spiritual concrete everywhere. And pave paradise and put up a parking lot. Pretty sure Luke sang that in one of his recent streams. Just got to get Luke in here. So then modern consciousness, it's starting to create some pathologies. In Steve's in my little cheat sheet here, he says the pathologies are like materialism, nihilism, exploitive, unscrupulous, selfish, greedy, so that needs to be transcended as well. And that gives rise to the postmodern consciousness. which I mapped to green, another cool color. And um, I, I think Steve has kind of updated his language on this to be instead of just postmodern consciousness, progressive postmodern consciousness, because it I think it my guess is it kind of differentiates from just a purely postmodern philosophy, which is like this technical thing that doesn't really capture the cultural evolutionary process. I think people can get kind of confused by postmodernism as this like philosophy, which definitely feeds into this new cultural
Yeah.
movement, but it's easy to, I think, straw man this whole system because of the word postmodern. Because like a lot of people just see postmodern as like, oh, that was a wrong turn that we should have never taken, and we need to just go back. And I think that's part of the truth, but not the whole truth. Because
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, like, to get hyper TLC, like from my very limited vantage point, this is where I see like the work of Jordan Peterson ending. Was he was looking
mm-hmm.
at this thing and it seems like he could only see postmodern philosophy, and there are plenty of issues in that. I mean, it's not just one philosophy. There's so many philosophies within that, of structuralism, post-structuralism, yada yada. But then it was like, it's probably just because of age. Because I was always like, why don't you read like David Foster Wallace, or why don't you like watch a Quentin Tarantino film? There's like so much beauty in postmodern art, or all the, whatever kind of language you want to put on it, that, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
It's tricky.
I'm glad you brought up Jordan Peterson, because I feel like understanding the spiral dynamics actually helps explain Jordan Peterson a little bit better. So let's come back to that, but I just want to like lay out a few of the
Yeah.
kind of the positive values of this worldview. So you have like inclusion of those previously marginalized or exploited, consensus decision making and egalitarianism, environmentalism and preference for natural, multiculturalism and spiritual diversity, personal growth of the whole person, and sensitivity. There's a lot of this stuff in the TLC, whether like,
Yes.
and people wouldn't identify as like progressive or postmodern, but this is like, we're swimming in this. And it's like, even the way we talk, we're sensitive. We like want to listen. We don't want to dominate everybody. We want to have this like kind of this gestalt that happens in conversation where something new is birthed. But the only way to do that is if everyone's contributing, and so there's real value here. And what's interesting about Jordan Peterson is, this, I think kind of the inner workings of the heart and mind, the sensitivity of like the inner world, the psychology, the field of psychology. I think I would kind of map that to this progressive postmodern worldview. Maybe not. Maybe that's debatable. But there's a
Freud
sensitivity.
And Jung are only 100 years old.
Yeah.
120, like, 150. Like, depth psychology is a new thing.
Yeah. So Jordan Peterson, I think he's proto-integral, and we haven't gotten to the integral stage, and it's already 8:50. Oh my gosh.
I know. We're gonna have to do another round of this at some point in the future.
He's kind of integrating this progressive postmodern worldview, modern consciousness, and traditional consciousness. Like his heart, I think, is in traditionalism, but he has all of this training in postmodern progressive archetypes, really useful like psychological nuggets. I mean, he's like helped my marriage, and my wife would like hate it if I mean, she knows that there's like some things that I've gotten from Jordan Peterson, but um, like there's little things that even me is like kind of a flaming liberal. I'm actually not a flaming liberal. I'm a developmentalist. So I weave the right and the left, the sacrifice self and the express self together into a song. But maybe we don't go down the Jordan Peterson rabbit hole right now and come back to that. But it's interesting to see how he has this ability, which I see in a lot of integral thinkers, where he's able to make you feel both like he's being an ally and like he's an enemy. And I think that is a quality that you see in integral thinkers, people who are kind of operating from this developmental worldview, where they're able to both challenge and support you at the same time. And I think Jordan Peterson is good at that. I think a lot of people in the TLC are good at that.
Yeah. I want to drop in 3 quick things, and then we can move to the next. So one of the things that I think about a lot is like when I was working in megachurch land. This is not true of all megachurches, but the megachurch I was at was very much that traditional blue sort of like beliefs, but then the modernist orange like functioning, where they were using like science and data and information and large buildings with multi-site things. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting to be able to see like the belief structure is kind of here, but then the tools you're using kind of come out from this space. So like that interests me. The other thing, which is probably obvious at this point, listening to Rigel and I, is there's like this great temptation to like be like, oh, well, I'm here on the spiral and you're only down there on the spiral. And I don't want to go down this path, but I want to just make note of like, I don't know what to do with that hierarchy, because that was one of the things I've struggled with talking about spiral dynamics in an open setting, is like, how do you even have a conversation without making someone feel like judged?
Yeah.
And then the last thing I want to drop in is one of the things I learned from Rob Bell that I thought was really interesting is if like an individual, as they're developing, you normally look forward with fear and you look backward with condescension.
Yeah.
So it's like whatever you are, whatever's coming next, you're like, no. And then whatever's behind you, you're like, oh man. And it's just very judgmental.
Right.
And I see that in myself all across my whole life in different places.
That's fantastic. And that's, I think, when you're looking at this spiral, in spiral dynamics terms, they call everything up to and including progressive postmodern consciousness first tier. And past that, they call it second tier. And I think it's because you're moving out of this like fear of what's transcendent to me and disgust at what's kind of below me, and you're moving into this space of like kind of playful openness to maybe what's further along, and kind of reflective, integrative stance towards all these other kind of stages that are operating within me, instead of like all of them being in competition with my worldview. They're now all actually part of me. And part of the work is like learning to integrate them, because when I can integrate them in me, then when I run across someone in a traditional consciousness or a warrior consciousness, I can actually speak their language from not just not from like a manipulative sort of way, but from like I actually understand the value of this stage of consciousness, to the point where like I'm willing to meet you where you're at. And this is like kenosis theology. Like this is how you can create hospitality with like all people, is to like actually value them, not just like paste on this this like what do they call it? just like tolerance. That was a big word in like the 90s.
Yeah.
Just kind of paste on tolerance, but actually like meet them and dance with them in their headspace, because it's actually your headspace too. Um, so do you have something to say?
Yes. No. I've just. Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Well, let me just talk about like the pathology of progressive postmodernism a little bit, so we can get to integral. So like one of the lovely things about progressive postmodernism is it's like non-hierarchical, and like everything's networked. It's like mycelial. I mean, you'll see this language in pop science, and it's like everything from the 90s into the early aughts and 2010s, and it's all like networked, mycelial,
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin, Bitcoin, non-hierarchical, decentralized, right? That's all I associate that with progressive postmodern. I would also even say that the internet is a progressive postmodern system, because you can't turn it off in one place, right? There's no like, off switch at the very top. And so people who like resist and bristle at progressive postmodern worldview and are on the internet streaming from their little flotilla are maybe not being completely honest about the values that this progressive postmodern worldview brings us, which is this like non-hierarchical way of interacting. It's very stable. It's super stable, but that non-hierarchical approach also becomes like our Achilles heel, because as soon as you bring hierarchy in, as soon as you start to make a value judgment, as soon as you say yes to one thing and no to another thing, it breaks. So like, in this progressive postmodern worldview, like we want to include all people, all stories are like valid, and we just want everyone to get along, right? But like there's certain people that really we have a hard time, like we want you to be part of our community as long as you also believe that all stories are valid. But that doesn't work with the modern consciousness or traditional consciousness or warrior consciousness. That is a very small way of looking at other people. Even though like the heart is in the right place, it just can't handle. I mean, it's pushing off of modern consciousness. It's like it's trying to like deconstruct all of these systems that modernity has put into place. And traditionalism is just like, disgusting. So I don't know. They call it the like. There's a philosophical term, performative contradiction. I think that's the word. Where, this kind of this overly firm grip on non-hierarchy actually creates its own hierarchy, and the whole thing just collapses. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing in a lot of corners of society. And that's where integral kind of comes in and helps us kind of bring things into a hierarchy that sees it like more as strata in geological terms. Like you have these strata where things are kind of built on top of each other, and if one strata crumbles, like the whole thing kind of crumbles down. Like, so we need to honor the archaic, the tribal, the warrior, traditional, modernist, progressive, postmodernist, because what's coming next is like built on all of this. And if one of them fails, like traditional consciousness, if that fails, like traditional consciousness has this like almost like a technology that knows how to deal with warrior consciousness. Like, why is it that
Yeah.
Christian bikers can go into like, you know, biker gangs, or, you know, they know how to do prison ministry in a way that like a egalitarian, like consensus driven liberal just doesn't have the language, because they don't want to honor this warrior consciousness. I don't know. You were going to say something. Oh God, it's 9.
Yeah, this timer's going to go off any second. I mean, we technically got through stuff, but at the end there, where you were like, they have a technology to deal with this other stage, I was just thinking about how civilization is built on like these interlocking sets of technologies that fix problems. And it's like, if you go, hey, we don't no rules, we're done with rules, then it's like the warriors then now like, oh, there's no rules, and then the warriors just rise up and are able to like run rampant. Yeah,
There's our timer.
I thought that was a really, really helpful way of thinking. The last thing I want to say before I ask you the final question and give you the end is when Daniel Garner talks about Gödel points, like how you have a map and there's like some kind of little hole in that map that you can like dive into and end up in a new map. Like, I think spiral dynamics, like each one of these stages is its own map with its own Gödel point. And currently in civilization, there's been enough individuals that became postmodern where American society is like, okay, we're going to shift this direction. And then it's like all kinds of chaos erupts as civilization, the great cruise ship begins to turn and things get topsy-turvy.
Right. And in between each of these kind of stages of development, as the culture and the world is evolving, cultural systems are evolving through these different stages, is like a lot of disruption. And historically, in these lower stages, a lot of bloodshed, So hopefully we can do this with a little bit less bloodshed now. The internet is like a nice way to kind of work some of this stuff out. Hopefully it doesn't lead to taking up with arms. Did you have a question? I feel like I had a thought I wanted to put. What was it? Oh yeah, you were talking about like maps, and I mean, this is probably another whole conversation, but each of these stages has their own version of goodness, truth, and beauty, and this is like, I think this is where, again, hospitality, self-emptying, kenosis, meeting people where they're at, there's a real opportunity to like try and put yourself in another person's shoes by seeing kind of what's good, true, and beautiful from their perspective. Because everyone just thinks everyone's doing the best they can. They think they're doing the right thing according to their stage of development, their consciousness. And I have just found a lot of freedom in being able to like have a tool that helps me meet people where they're at in a way that's like actually useful. I don't know. I'm rambling.
Yeah, no, I've long thought that spiral dynamics is like a meta map. It's a map of maps. And everything has flaws. It's not like it's perfect or anything. Okay, but the final question I want to ask is this kind of series that I've been doing. This will be the third interview. But this will be called Rigel and the Quest for the Holy Techne.
Yes.
So the final question for you, Rigel, is like, do you think that we found anything holy?
Can you, I don't know, ask that?
Yeah. So
like, what do you mean? Have we found anything holy? Like
in
right
the
now?
last hour of conversation, did anything come up for you that was holy? When I say holy, I guess I'm thinking of like this old definition of holy means set apart. I mean, it really means set apart for the purposes of God. And I'm just curious if anything kind of came up to you in the last hour, or if anything's coming up to you now that feels set apart.
Sacred, yeah. I mean, my understanding of holy, how do I understand holy? I mean, I when I'm like, okay, let me just bring this to metal art because this is the most like tangible way I can talk about this probably. When I am rummaging through my junk pile behind my shed, I I'm like looking for something, but I don't know like what I'm looking for yet. I'm kind of letting the junk pile um, speak to me, and then I'll something will spark, and I'll start pulling a thread, and it's some piece of metal like is speaking to me. It has, or maybe it has a story attached. I was like, oh yeah, I got that. That was part of like a washing machine that I found around the corner in front of someone's house who like maybe I sold to them. Uh, maybe the person maybe the washing machine is from a house that I sold to someone a long time ago that's been demolished, and I don't know. And so I'll kind of start pulling that thread and turn it into something that is like part of me. Um, and so I like this conversation. I feel like we're just pulling a thread here, and there were several times where things sparked. I think like watching you have some kind of aha moments, the goodness, truth, and beauty that is present in all these stages of development is, I think that is a holy artifact that I want to protect. Like I can even get kind of protective about that. And it would be fun to explore, I think, more of what that looks like with you, with anyone else who's like interested in just riffing on this stuff. Because for me, it's like it connects to hospitality, and um, I think hospitality is like this whole thing is centered around for me, which is kind of like part of my gift package. That's part of my package, the Rigel package that I have to offer the world is like making space for people. MAGA or woke, okay? MAGA or woke, you have a place here. I don't know. Did anything holy pop up to you?